Hey, Kat, what's going on?
John, good, thanks. How are you?
All right, so here's the fun part. First and foremost, when I have multiple windows open, that was an email coming in from a source that I didn't really care about. That's what you heard just there. So, all right, so spot me a second and tell me what you had for breakfast while I promote the fact that you are here discussing things on the show this week. What'd you have for breakfast?
John, I am a huge breakfast person. It is my favorite meal of the day, and I've always been a big breakfast eater. So, it's one of the things I miss most about my time at Atlanta United was going in, sitting down, and having the same breakfast every day while watching Sports Center or talking with guys or reading a newspaper. Always one of the first ones there, and just nice quiet breakfast. And still today, I still have basically the same breakfast every day. So that's three eggs, a piece of toast, and some fruit.
So what kind of eggs are you? What kind of eggs do you like? Are you a scrambled guy? What kind of eggs are we talking about here?
When I cook at home, I'm about an 80-20% mixture. 80% usually just scrambled, easy. 20% I'll fry them.
Okay, all right. So that was an excellent filibuster, sir. Thank you very much. Uh, when we get into the stretch run of the season, and I imagine that today's conversation is probably going to drift into topics that you've talked about a little bit this week, but I also want to keep it within the context of mentoring and advice for younger players and things like that. When you look at what Atlanta United has gone through this week, what runs through your mind about making news off the pitch before a match that is as important as this one is coming up on Saturday?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody involved, right? Your focus is shifted a little bit because of what's going on off the field, and that's never a good thing. And it just seems like there's been a lot of that this year, and maybe that's the reason why we're in a spot we're in right now. So yeah, it's tough, and obviously two different stories completely. And both, I well, for sure in Miles's case, I support Miles, and I think there's a lot more to that story that,
Yeah.
than the police report says. And so, that's one thing. And then, Joseph obviously is another big story. I think there's two sides to it. I think one is, I get it. Hey, if I were a betting man, I would have bet money that Joseph went in there in the locker room after the game and ripped into stuff and had a go and was upset. How could you not be?
Yeah.
So I get it. But then on the other hand, there's, and that's where Joseph struggled. I think that it comes from a good place in his heart, and it comes from he cares and he wants to win and he's frustrated. But then sometimes the emotions overrun, and he struggles with that fine line, that balance that we talk about with everything in life, right? Of where to cut it off sometimes, and to you've made your point, and now let it go before it gets too far. And apparently this one went too far for the coaching staff and the club's liking. And they handle it different. This happened multiple times with Tata. Joseph, would be agitated, and there's something to that because he's holding the team and the club accountable. But sometimes you look at the other side and say, hey, you're being a child and you can't act like that. So there's a real fine line. So it's just unfortunate that we're at where we're at right now.
And that's why I wanted to have that as kind of like the opening of the door when it comes to mentoring and consulting younger players, because there will be times in a younger person's life where you will have these kinds of moments, and compartmentalizing from, if you're not the one who's directly associated with the event, you're going to have to compartmentalize because of the task at hand and knowing that there are other things that you wish to accomplish with you and your teammates. And I think that it's a learning point for a lot of young folks. It's a learning point, frankly, for adults, even as we, are growing older and we have the workplace and all these kinds of things. But compartmentalizing from an athletic standpoint, it's going to be one of those early lessons that younger athletes have to focus. And when you and Greg are talking about these kinds of things from a mentoring perspective and tuning out noise and focusing and compartmentalizing, I guess that might even be three different things. What are those conversations like about compartmentalizing and focusing on the task in front of you so you're not distracted from the larger picture?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, that's a challenge for everybody because, we're athletes and, we've got things going on the field. Every athlete is a human being, right? And human beings, we're all going through our own stuff off the field, and there's always stuff going on, right? Family stuff and school stuff, relationship stuff. So there's always stuff going on, right? But we always say, like, okay, you've got a finite amount of time to work on your craft or work on what you love to do. In this case, being soccer. And so you want to make sure that whatever's going on outside of the field, right, you leave it there. And it's not to say it's not important, but for this finite amount of time that you get to do something fun and put everything into it, right, you bring some of those emotions onto the field and you focus solely on what's in front of you and what you can control. And what you can control in that moment is your focus, your effort, how much you give, and how present you are, for yourself and for your teammates. And it's not an easy task. Like you said, John, there's still adults that are learning how to do that, right? And not take work home with them, or, not take attitudes from the house to their work, or, what's going on, stress. Yep. So it's a really difficult thing to learn. I'm not saying it's not, I'm not saying it's easy, but the good ones are able to do it better than, the amateur ones.
So then, two-part question. How long did it take you as both an athlete and as a parent / husband to get compartmentalization locked in to where you know where you're going with it? And when it came to teammates in your past, and it could be all the way back to when you were first starting out, who are some of the better compartmentalizers that you came across, and what made them good at doing that?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's difficult. The thing is, like, you don't know someone's good at compartmentalizing it because they do such a good job of, like, not letting other things affect them. And I think it's more likely the most consistent players, right? The most consistent players are usually the ones that are able to do it day in and day out and not let other things that are on their mind or what they're dealing with, right? Even contract situations, that's a big one, right? For pro athletes. But that's a good example of, like, okay, we can't control that stuff right now, or even if it is stuff that you can control outside of the field, right? It's not important to success right now on the field and what I'm trying to do. But also, I think for me, it was, I probably have the opposite ability where I was a bit of a procrastinator, or maybe still am. And so for me, it was always like, well, I'll get to it later. And, I want to have fun here and I want to focus on soccer because this is what I love to do. And so I don't really care about anything else right now. Like, I just want to go out there and have fun in soccer because I love soccer the most. And this is what I want to focus on. So for me, I had to get better at, like, actually focusing on those things when I wasn't in soccer. Yeah. It was, for me, the compartmentalizing came a little bit easier because I just loved to play soccer and really nothing else mattered when I was out there. And I guess because I felt that way growing up, it maybe helped me in adulthood. And like I said, maybe my ability, I'll say ability, push things off helped.
So were you the kind of guy that crammed for a test? You knew a test was coming, and you had, or your paper was you had a deadline, and were you the kind of guy in school that would sit there and it's like, okay, yeah, I know I've got a due date. I'll get it done. Everything will be cool and everything will be great. And then it's like the night before, it's like, oh, bleep, I've got a paper to write or I've got to study for this test. Were you that kind of a guy growing up?
Unfortunately, a little bit. I'm trying, and I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm trying to get my kids to not be that way, right? Not wait until Monday morning when you had all weekend to get your homework done or whatever it might be. But yeah, I had an ability to memorize things really quickly. And so I knew I could lean on that. But the downside was, it was in my mind for such a small amount of time before I, spit it back out for a test or something, that I didn't retain a lot of it. So, to be perfectly honest, so, a lot of my schooling, like I did great in school. I got good grades, and took it seriously and wanted to get good grades, but I didn't retain as much as I wish I did, because literally I was just focused on like, okay, memorize it real quick, spit it out for the test, rather than actually learning and then taking it in and growing.
Did that same thing happen with soccer when you started out as a professional, where it's like, okay, here's the lesson before this match, and just almost take it a match at a time before you started accumulating information and it became easier for you? Were you that way when you started out?
No, actually. No, soccer was always different. And maybe that's just because I cared about it more. Like I said, I took school seriously and wanted to get good grades and knew it was important. But I also knew that I wanted to play professional soccer, and that was, my pathway at that point. And I wanted to do that for a very long time. And so, no, which is strange. I always had, like a bit of a longer term view. I wanted to soak in as much information and learn as much as I could, on and off the field from everyone I was surrounded with. So I wish I had done a little bit of more of that off the field as well. But no, soccer always came a little different.
So when you and Greg are doing your mentoring, when you look at the younger student athletes today, how many of them are mirror images of what you were, and what's your message to them in those instances if you start to sit there and see somebody that might be, following the Parkhurst path? I mean, when do you notice those folks more, or do you notice them first, and what's your talk with those folks?
Yeah, I'll say that for the most part, kids are aware of the need to be well balanced, the need to do well in school, and the opportunity that provides. But will say that there's more pressure on kids these days, and I think that not just pressure on the field, right? There's pressure on the field for sure.
Yeah.
There's pressure to do well in school. There's peer pressure that kids have always been going through, right? We speak a lot with middle school aged, roughly that age group, some high school as well, and that's a tough period of time in life, right? You're going through a lot of things, and so there's a lot going on other than the sport, and so I think that there's some kids that are able to compartmentalize like I was, just because maybe they don't care as much about what's going on, and just want to play soccer. But I'd say there's more on the other side that have a lot of stuff going on, and tryouts and tournaments and pressure. And, how do you deal with all that stuff while trying to play soccer?
So, understanding, I guess, at the beginning of this question, that the younger athletes are different because of the pressures that they face versus what you faced versus what I faced, as we went through three separate demographic groups there in that lead in. I mean, do they handle it differently? Do they handle it better than we did? When you observe the younger student athletes today, are they handling it better? Or are they just handling it differently because the pressures are different and the pressures may be more? How are they handling it these days from your perspectives when you get that first touch with them?
Yeah, differently. And I think that's just part of the environment as well. I mean, John, I'm sure when you were growing up, right, you took your fair share of
Back in the 1790s, yes, when I was growing up.
Oh man, I don't want to say abuse, but like, yeah, I'm
It
sure
was the love
tough
was
love.
harder. It was tougher love, I think, when I was than probably when you were versus today. But I think that the love today might be just as tough, just coming at you from more angles. I would think maybe.
Yeah, the love today is tougher in a different sense, in the sense of pressure.
Yeah.
I think, versus kind of like grit and physical or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So full disclosure, I'll go story time with John here for a second to talk about that kind of stuff. Okay. So I mean, once again, this is a generational thing, obviously. My grandfather, OSS, which was the predecessor to the CIA, Battle of Britain, North Africa, World War II, Korea, wanted to go to Vietnam and be a part of the armed services, but he was told at the time he was too old. And so they had him working in the Army Air Corps doing other things, even when he was in his late 50s, early 60s. He was a guy that believed in the ruler. It's, you get the ruler out and it's like, okay, so you stepped out of line and this was how he was raised. He'd get out the ruler and he'd pop you with it. But then you get to that point where I want to say I might have been 12 or 13. And my grandfather, God bless him, God love him. He took the ruler and he literally was chasing after me in the house because I had done something. I think I'd mouthed off, which was completely inappropriate on my part. Takes the ruler, and it was one of those long 16-inch thick wooden rulers that had the metal strip across the top that kind of held it together. He took the ruler and he popped me in the butt with it, and the ruler snapped in half. That should tell you something about my hindquarters at the time and the jeans that I was wearing. But he hits me with it, and the ruler snaps in half. And so you've got half a ruler, and you have that metal strip just for the remainder that's just hanging there in the air. And he looked at it, and we both started laughing because that was the moment where it's like, okay, I guess I can't use this as a way to get him in line anymore, and we've got to come up with other things. So yeah, I think that the love when I was growing up versus when you were growing up was tougher for different reasons because of what the generations faced and
Yeah.
how they were raised and went in. And so so quick story time with John. I yield the floor when it comes to tough love.
Yeah, and I think that we're all thankful that we've progressed as society and things are different, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, kids go through a lot more these days as far as they're dealing with pressure from parents in sports, in school. They're dealing with social media, which we didn't have to deal with when
No
we were
doubt.
young,
Yeah.
which brings a whole new element of pressure and self-esteem and a whole host of issues that thankfully we never had to deal with.
Right.
So I think that there's a unique challenge on kids today, and how they deal with those things. And it's a tough one because, like I said, we didn't have to deal with some of the challenges that they're dealing with, right? So we didn't have to, and we don't have the experience of their being their age and dealing with it. We just know what we know, and we're trying to help our kids through it as best as we can, whether we're shielding them from social media for as long as possible, which I'm trying to do with my own kids, or helping them adapt to it and learn how to use it positively and shut out the negative, which is always easier said than done. So
Yes.
it's tough sledding for kids these days. I'm not saying it's not, but that's also the benefit of sport, right? Where you're able to sometimes get away from all that, right? Get away from real life for a little bit, get away from all that stuff, and just put all of your energy into the sport and have a release, and use those emotions to go out there and have fun and get away from any type of responsibility off the field, and be a kid and have fun and focus on the craft.
All right, since you mentioned social media, that'll be the next topic. Michael Parkhurst hanging out with us for the Friday Free Kick at BG Mentoring on the Twitters, at MF Parkhurst on the Twitters. Social media. When I was growing up, the only social media we had was maybe yelling back at the television. We would play outdoors. I was the kind of kid with the neighborhood. You get together with the neighborhood kids, you play baseball, you play whatever sports on your mind, and you're there and you're out there playing until dusk happens. The light on the porch goes on, and yes, I was in that stereotypic environment. And your mom's yelling for you to come inside. That was when the games ended. You probably a little different since you were focused on trying to become a professional athlete. I was focused on trying to figure out if I could get my driver's license before I was 18. And today, social media it's a place where it can be beneficial. It can be as equally toxic, and it can be addictive when it comes to how much time you link to it and how it can impress where you go with the rest of your day. When you have these conversations about the good and bad of social media, because social media can be where you post your huddle tape, and it can sit there and be a link to a college coach. Hey, this is my huddle tape, and it can get you recruited. It can get you watched. There are positives and negatives in social media these days. When you have these kinds of discussions about riding that thin line of social media, what is that feedback like, and what are those conversations like?
Yeah, those are tough conversations, because you're right. The social media is here for good, and there is definitely some good from it, right? You can make a living off of social media these days. You can definitely use it to get jobs and to be seen and for outreach and to connect with brands. And there's a lot of good from social media, but for sure there's, like you said, there's a toxic side to social media, particularly for athletes, right? It's particularly for anyone that's in the spotlight a little bit. And particularly for teenagers who unfortunately have to deal with just other kids that are just flat out mean sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
For no reason, usually other than just jealousy or, who knows, wanting to be mean. So, one of the things that we try to talk to about, on the athletic side of things is, as far as shutting off criticism or, hey, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? We always say that if you wouldn't take advice from someone on what to do, either on the field or off the field, right? If you wouldn't take advice from that person, don't take criticism from them either, right? It's not worth the time to either read it or to analyze it, because that person most likely does not have more knowledge than either yourself or your coaching staff or your parents or anything like that. They just have a voice that they want to throw out there. And so we always try and preach that, right? If you wouldn't take knowledge from them, don't take criticism. But that's on the athletic side, right? And then on the other side, it's surrounding yourself with good, positive people, right? We talk about being positive and being optimistic and a lot, and shutting out, the opposite. And you have to do that on social media too, right? There's a lot of toxic on there, and it's who you follow, it's what you experience, and some of that isn't within your control, and making sure that you're following people and putting yourself in areas of social media that are beneficial to your health and your future, rather than the opposite.
Yeah, and that's another tough line, because you don't know when you're going into a situation. First contact, before relationships, grow and evolve, you don't know what, that first contact, you feel like you need to make that first contact. You're being cordial, you're being polite, you're adding this person to your circle. And then as that relationship evolves, it could go down one of two paths. And sadly, sometimes it can be one where that individual's just angry at you all the time for whatever reason. You didn't do A, B, C, D, or E out there. You're a disappointment. You're all these kinds of stuff, all these kinds of things. And it's a difficult dance trying to be cordial, polite, and welcoming at the same time, when that person might come back and bite you on the backside after that relationship has started, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I gauge this and how do I walk through this social media minefield? I mean, you mentioned the difficulties. It really is difficult these days trying to juggle the good, the bad, the public, and the private in all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I'm not super active on social media for a lot of those reasons, right? A lot of times and there's always times like I've thought about like, "God, I wish I could say this, but I know that there's going to be backlash from a small minority, and usually the minority is louder than the majority.
Right.
Um, and also, the arguments on social media is a no-win situation. Right? There's no winning an argument on social media, and also, right, I consider myself humorous in that I have a good sense of humor and sarcasm, right? But
No,
sarcasm doesn't go well on social media
no,
either.
no, it does not.
So, you know, I am very, very cautious about what I post, what I choose to post. Right? I very, very rarely have anything on with my family on there, and even on Twitter, I post very little, just because of that. Right? It's just, especially in today's society, it's tough to have any sort of stance on anything without the other side really bashing you. And so, the ways of having conversations about things is, I don't want to say it's over, but it's on pause right now as
Yeah.
in society today. And you have to be aware of that, and especially as a younger person, right? That you don't want to get into arguments on social media, and anything you post can live forever.
Mhm.
And that's a lesson that needs to be learned early on too, because one day kids will be looking for jobs, and all that stuff is out there forever. Even if you delete your post, it's still
It's
probably out there.
It is in the ether someplace. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
Uh, Two more things before we go. And once again, thanks for hanging out with us early on a Friday morning after you've had your eggs and breakfast. You're one step ahead of me. This is the breakfast. Actually, I had my blueberry muffin about 30 minutes before air, and the caffeine working over here. So two other things real quick. Somebody's got a birthday today, and it is a former teammate of yours. And last time I checked, he's big, he's bald, and he's some kind of a wall. It is his birthday today. What is your favorite story about Brad Gazan that you can say on the air that personifies who he is as an individual in the time that you guys have interacted together?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
What's your best birthday story? What's your best? So let's see if we can pin it down. What's your favorite? Let's do it this way. What's your favorite Brad Gazan story on his birthday?
I'll what I can say and what.
That's what I'm saying. What you can say on the air.
Yeah, there's two. I mean, Brad and I have a really good relationship. We goof around a lot, obviously, as people know. Two things that I'll remember for a long time are: one, we were together when we qualified for the 2014 World Cup in Columbus. We were both there, and we had a friendly battle of throwing beer on each other, surprisingly, during the celebrations and kind of goofing around. And I've got some of it on video, and so I remember that moment. And then also in Columbus, after a game, him, myself, and Darlington enjoying ourselves late in the evening on scooters, which probably looking back wasn't the smartest idea, and trying to go through a McDonald's drive-through and getting denied. And
What?
yeah,
Because you were on scooters as opposed to something on four wheels?
I don't know. They were probably scared of Brad, but yeah, I don't know. We weren't allowed. So we weren't too happy about that, but that was it.
He's big as bald. He's big. He's bald. And he wants a quarter pounder. Brad Gazan. I mean, wow. Okay, and then this weekend, Atlanta's got to have it. Yeah, this is a 6-pointer basically with Toronto. Toronto and Atlanta both need 3 points in this one. I'm anticipating that this one tomorrow night's going to be half past crazy. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Toronto obviously offensively look very good these days. The Italians are the real deal. But you can tell from last week, like they've got a tough time defending the goal, right? So there's opportunities to be had there. It's just a question of if we can finish them, right? I mean, we've created some opportunities even in Portland, but we have to you have to finish the opportunities or the season's over. Because I agree, if you don't win, if you don't take 3 points, that's it. It maybe not mathematically, but it's it. It's done. So, I hope we come out, full steam ahead and really put it to them because, obviously they're vulnerable in the back. Their confidence is down. So, and honestly, it's probably going to take 2 or 3 goals to win the game. So, knowing that, I really hope we get after it and have a good performance.
Latest with Beyond Goals Mentoring, what's going on?
We're making great progress with the non-for-profit side of things. Really trying to grow our outreach and reach a bigger number of kids. And that process takes a long time, and there's a lot of things that go into it. And we've made substantial progress on that side, and really, really close to now raising funds, and so that we can go out there and do more and reach more and have a bigger effect. I'm coming down in October to do a few things with Atlanta United, with Beyond Soccer in the Streets, with Boys and Girls Club of Atlanta. So yeah, excited about that.
And at the same time, you will keep us posted on when SDH comes up and does the remote from Tidewater Landing. True?
Absolutely. Definitely.
We'll keep it posted on that. Cap, it's great to see you. Michael Parkhurst, Beyond Goals Mentoring, at MF Parkhurst on the Twitters, at BG Mentoring on the Twitters. We will see you next time around. Thanks for hanging out.
See you, John. Enjoy the weekend.
You bet. Michael Parkhurst. It's great to have Cap as a part of the discussion here on your Fridays, and Greg Garza and our friends at Beyond Goals Mentoring.